We can't just walk out of this building tonight, can we, and convert our children. Can't do that. But you can pray. You can teach. You can be an example. You can press on.
This is the duty of parents, to imitate God, to let instruction expound correction, and with a rod in the hand and a word in the mouth, to train up their children to life eternal. Thomas Case. This week on Doctrine for Life, Dr. Joel Beeke continues his sermon on the life of Isaac, encouraging parents and children alike to embrace God's covenantal work in families. To enjoy more resources from the pen and pulpit of Dr. Beeke, please visit joelbeeke.org.
Despite the source of blessing and the sovereignty of blessing, this blessing was greatly impacted for ill by the behavior of this family. It was spoiled in some very real ways. It wasn't lost completely, but it was spoiled in some very real ways. It doesn't mean that sin doesn't matter. Sin does matter. And sin can put large blots on the blessings of God. It can spoil them in notable ways. And you see that here and in subsequent chapters. I will leave aside Esau for a moment because Esau sinned himself outside of the covenant line anyway. But Isaac and Rebekah and Jacob all had to endure consequences from this dysfunctional behavior in which they spoiled much of the blessing. Isaac, well, if we give him the benefit of the doubt, perhaps he does change a bit for the better after this shock of God's turning his devious plan upside down. We have two more glimpses of Isaac in the Bible. First, he's finally talking with Rebekah at the end of this chapter. Well, that's a good thing. He's talking with his wife. It's a pity they hadn't talked a great deal more earlier. And then in the next chapter, we see that he warns Jacob not to follow Esau's example and marry a Canaanite. Too bad he didn't warn Esau earlier more. And he gives him the blessing of Abraham. But that is to Jacob. But there's nothing more. And there's something kind of eerie about this, that Isaac lives for over 40 more years, and you just don't read anything about him. And then suddenly in chapter 35, he dies. And you say, oh yeah, Isaac's been alive all this time. Where's he been? What's been going on? We don't know. Now, we can never argue from silence, but it seems, doesn't it, that his life is rather insignificant those last decades. How would you like to live the last 2 or 3 decades of your life in relative insignificance? There seems to be some consequences to his careless living. Rebekah loses both of her sons. She thought to help the Lord along, but she ends up losing both of her sons. Esau, not only, but even Jacob. She never sees him again. And she too drops out of the picture. We're not even told when she dies or where she dies. And ironically, we're told about the death of her nurse rather than her own death. We're just told at the end of Genesis that Rebekah had died. She vanishes into apparent insignificance as well. And Jacob, what consequences he faced? He has to leave his home. He has to leave the promised land. He has to go into exile and serve long and hard years in exile. And here's the irony and justice of it all. Jacob, the cheater, is going to be cheated by his uncle Laban over and over and over again. He's going to have to learn what it means to be cheated against. He who deceived his blind father is going to participate in a blind marriage. And he'll find out in the morning that he's married to the wrong person. Our sin has consequences, even if we are the sovereign recipients of the blessings of God. The comfort, of course, is that if we are Christians, we can't lose God's ultimate blessing. We can't lose our salvation. We can't lose heaven, but we can certainly spoil our enjoyment of life upon this earth. We can spoil our usefulness on this earth. How sadly possible it is for true Christians to behave in foolish and sinful ways, to damage and disrupt their marriages, to damage their children, to lose the peace of their own hearts, to stop living with a concrete, single-eyed purpose, to live to the glory of God, and to complicate, make a mess of their lives and start building up bitter regrets and be sidelined from God's significant purposes. And their lives often can devolve into insignificant, meaningless, humdrum, daily pursuits without spiritual communion with God, without being a great blessing to others. Oh, how sin can drag us down. Jacob is impacted. Isaac is impacted. Rebekah is impacted. And you and I are impacted by sin as well. And this is such a tragedy, you see, because if you're a true believer, you want more than heaven. You want more than having your soul to be saved, don't you? You want a meaningful life, don't you? You want to be fruitful. You want to be God-honoring. You want to serve to the glory of God. You want to make a difference with the people around you. You want your life to be salt in the earth and light on the hill. You want to show, as David put it, the beauty of the Lord. We don't want to live lives without significance if we're believers. We want divine blessing that pours itself out like oil over us and upon us by the Spirit of God, and we go out and be blessed and be a blessing. That's what's so beautiful about the original Abrahamic blessing. I will both bless thee and thou shalt be a blessing. That's what a believer wants. To be a blessing to others, richly, fully, continuously, everywhere. Not just for myself, not just for my family, but wherever I go, I want to touch other people's lives with the blessing of the Most High. But you can't do that very easily in a dysfunctional family. So let me use the rest of the time tonight I've been making, I hope, practical applications, but now I want to take them and I want to bring this right into your home, to my home. And we want to look at 6 home problems and their remedies and talk to ourselves heart to heart a bit here. Because we need to understand that we can retain, by the grace of God, we can retain God's blessings relatively unspoiled if we avoid these kinds of home problems that did so much damage in Isaac's family. Let me give you 6 of them. First, an unconverted child. That was the first difficulty. Esau, and maybe Jacob, there's debate about when Jacob was converted, but certainly Esau, we know that for sure, had not come to faith. And he would live and he would die graceless. What a trial that can be. And how much a restless, unconverted child like Esau can upset a home in which most of the people want to be God-fearing. What a struggle. Maybe you have that problem in your own home today. You've got one or more unconverted children who are always, by word, by conversation, by behavior, by body language, always seeming to push away the fear of God. And they seem to resist that wonderful Puritan model that our homes should be little churches. How painful this is. Painful to see our children go astray. Painful to see that they don't want to walk in the ways of God. If John said, I've got no greater joy than to see my children walk in the truth, certainly there's no greater sorrow than to see our children not walk in the truth. So this is a very real experience, not just for Isaac and Rebekah, but no doubt for many of us in this church building tonight. What can we do about it? Well, we can't just walk out of this building tonight, can we, and convert our children. Can't do that. But you can pray. You can teach. You can be an example. You can press on. You can believe in the covenant faithfulness of God. You can hope in the power of God. You can trust yourself and your children to the covenant faithfulness of God, that it's His normal way to work along covenantal lines and covenantal children. Don't give up on the Lord. He's sovereign in His blessing. He's covenantal in His character. You have every reason to hope that as you nurture your children in the ways of God, now or later, God will bless it. So press on. Press on. Do your very best to give your children, regardless of age, right teaching and right living and examples. Who knows? Maybe 10 years from now, they'll come back to you and they'll say, I want to thank you, Dad and Mom, for not letting me go my own way. Thank you for your example. Thank you for the fear of God you showed me. I saw reality of religion in you, even though I kicked against the pricks for a while.
Let's take a quick break.
You're listening to the All of Life for God podcast from Reformation Heritage Books. Use the code ALG at checkout to save 10% on your next order.
Live as if you thought that Christ might come at any time. 19th century evangelical leader J.C. Ryle knew that there was only one way to prepare for Christ's return, to put on the Lord Jesus Christ in every aspect of our lives. Now you can take up this charge daily with Our Great Redeemer, a new 365-day devotional featuring excerpts from J.C. Ryle's sermons. This compilation of 365 powerful readings from Ryle's preaching and writing is rich with grace, truth, and conviction that defined Ryle's ministry. Order Our Great Redeemer today at the link in our show notes.
What is the chief end of man? To glorify God and enjoy Him forever. For centuries, the Westminster Shorter Catechism has helped Christians, young and old, to know their chief end. William Boekestein, Jonathan Landry Cruz, and Andrew J. Miller's insightful devotional, Glorifying and Enjoying God, introduces a new generation to its powerful message in 52 short chapters. Visit heritagebooks.org/glorifying to learn more.
Thousands of sermons, dozens of books, commentaries, and devotionals, decades of faithful ministry. By God's grace, the fruit of Charles Spurgeon's ministry is bountiful. But do you know the man behind the ministry? In Spurgeon, A Life, Alex de Prima paints a fresh portrait of the most well-known gospel minister of the 19th century. Combining academic expertise with popular presentation, this biography of the Prince of Preachers is the best modern introduction to Spurgeon's ministry. Learn more at the link in our show notes.
I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes. Romans 1, verse 16. This truth is at the heart of Paul Washer's Christ-exalting preaching. From the Recovering the Gospel series to the Preeminent Christ, Washer's works call believers and unbelievers alike to behold the Savior in the gospel. Explore the writings of Paul Washer, published exclusively by Reformation Heritage Books, by visiting heritagebooks.org/paulwasher. Thanks for listening to the All of Life for God podcast. Don't forget to enter the code ALG to save 10% on your next order with Reformation Heritage Books.
You see, expect God to work. And if and when you do see fruits, don't discourage those fruits. Be hopeful. Don't lay your hands directly and say, oh, at the first sign, the first fruit, this is it. This is everything. Don't do that. You can bring the venison too quickly. But do encourage your children as they seek the Lord. Don't dampen God's own work by digging too tenderly near a small plant. I once visited an old elder. He was telling me the story of another elder who had a child who was beginning to fear the Lord, but the child was still engaged in a few things that were a little bit risque. And that elder refused to believe God was at work at all in his child. And the one elder said to the other one, I've learned not to dig too deeply near a tender plant. God may be working in your children even now. You may see a few signs of it, a few other things that trouble you. Wait on God. Keep teaching. Keep waiting. Avoid presumptive regeneration on the one hand, but also avoid presumptive unregeneration on the other. Keep bringing them the marks of grace. Who can tell what the Lord will do? Problem number 2, unbridled rivalry. Oh, what a problem this is. 2 children at each other's throats under one roof. Esau and Jacob never seemed to get along. In fact, we read in Genesis 27 that Esau would have killed Jacob if he could. What a sad situation. Some of you know what that's like. Maybe not that extreme, but sibling rivalry in the home. How sad, boys and girls, when brothers and sisters don't get along. What a grief you can be to your mom and to your dad when you're always at each other's throats, always saying hard words, always teasing each other cruelly. How unchristian, how ungodly a home can be when one brother or one sister is always teasing the others. How discouraging. Well, what are we to do? Well, yes, exercise patience. Yes, persevere in discipline. Yes, keep correcting. But remember, God is a sovereign God of blessing. Take comfort from this, knowing that God knows your trials. He sees the incompatibility between some of your children, and He can make it right. He can bring them to maturity. He can bring them to exercise more love. Keep giving an example yourself and pray. Pray to the sovereign God, the source of all blessing, to resolve this problem. Problem number 3, unequally yoked children. What a problem this was. Genesis 26, 34, 35. Esau purposely went out and took Hittite women, not 1, 2, and they were a continual grief of mind to Isaac and Rebekah. Esau knew very well, both from Abraham's example as well as from his parental teaching, that he should marry within the godly circle. Abraham had set a beautiful example. He had said to Isaac, don't, or rather his servant, don't take from among the heathen around here, don't take a wife for my son Isaac. What fellowship does light have with darkness? Or the temple of God with idols, or heaven with hell? There's incompatibility at the deepest level between the ungodly and the godly. And yet Esau, in his selfishness and his carnality and his sensual lusts, and he was a thoroughly worldly man, he just went right ahead. He chose to disregard all this teaching. He went right ahead. Dear singles, I say to you tonight, don't follow Esau's footsteps. Don't allow yourself to even think about developing a relationship with anyone who does not have a deep respect for and a love of the faith of the gospel. Marry only in the Lord. Fourth problem, unnerving infirmities. Unnerving infirmities. Isaac is old. We have a picture here of an old man, a blind man. The shadow of death is upon him. How unnerving that can be. When people get old and infirmities trouble them, I often say to our seniors, I've said it to some of you, that's not easy to be old, is it? And every one of you have said to me, who are old, right away, no, it's not. It's not easy. To lose your hearing, to lose your sight, to lose your ability to move about, to lose driving privileges. It's unnerving. And yet this is reality. God's people are not exempt from pain and infirmity and disablement and old age and blindness and deafness and loneliness. So what are we to do about this? Well, two things. First of all, make sure that we make the best possible use of our faculties while we have them. What are you doing now with your eyes? What are you doing now with your ears? What are you listening to? What are you looking at? What are you doing now with your hands? What are you doing now with your feet? What are you doing now with your mind? You're thinking on good things? The second thing is this. Have compassion. Jacob and Esau and Rebekah all should have had compassion on Isaac. Have compassion and show special kindness to your parents or your grandparents or to those in the church who have age and infirmities against them. And show special kindness to those who are losing various faculties. Or maybe in the beginning stages of Alzheimer's or losing their hearing or their sight. One day you may be a senior as well. You may lose some of your faculties. You may deeply appreciate thoughtfulness from others. Remember, you see, these afflictions don't happen outside the home. They happen in the home. Let us treat one another in the home with great love, especially when there are infirmities present. Problem 5, an uninhabited home. Uninhabited home. The problem of a child away from home, in other words. Esau left, and Jacob had to leave. Jacob had to go to Padan Aram. There he found a wife, but he wouldn't return for 20 years. Never saw his mother again. What a burden. We live in a mobile society today. Children often leave home very early. We at least ought to think twice before we send them away early. Are they strong enough to withstand temptation in a distant college? Perhaps they are. Is there a good church in that city? Perhaps there is. Well, that makes it more palatable, but do remember, it's always good and wise to consider these things. Don't send your children away from your home lightly. You lose a lot of influence. God can take care of them wherever He sends them. Of course, He took care of Jacob away from home in a marvelous way. But don't be in a hurry to push your children out of the nest. I think that's the biblical teaching here. Problem 6. Uncommunicated games. This is the real problem. This is the ultimate problem of this home. Everybody's playing games with everybody else. Isaac has his scheme. Rebekah has his scheme. Isaac schemes with Esau. Rebekah schemes with Jacob. It's one against another. All playing games. No one being open. These things are written for our learning, the New Testament says. We must strive to learn to live harmoniously together, to live openly, to talk about differences honestly. Game playing must stop. Wife and husband ought to be able to look each other in the eye, 6 inches away from each other, and be fully transparent and honest and open and speak from heart to heart about the greatest problems, their deepest joys and fears and sorrows. We must strive as parents to be models of openness and affection toward our partners and in our family. This is the only way to build a relationship, a family of trust. Trust is the foundational element, isn't it, of a family that God sovereignly blesses with closeness and intimacy. See, my point here is that ultimately there was a spiritual problem in Isaac's home. And the spiritual problem becomes a practical problem. The spiritual problem is they don't trust God. And the practical problem is, therefore, they don't trust each other. You see, Isaac didn't trust God. He wanted Esau to be blessed. I'll do it my way. Rebekah didn't trust God. Well, yes, Jacob would be blessed, but I'll help God along. Neither one of them trusted God. Esau didn't trust God. He wasn't even thinking about God. Jacob didn't trust God. Else he wouldn't have put on the hairy skin. None of them were trusting God. And when you don't trust God, how can you trust each other? The vertical relationship we have with God always impacts the horizontal we have with one another. And so Isaac doesn't trust Rebekah. Isaac doesn't trust Jacob. You notice how he keeps saying, come near to me, kiss me. He smells him. Are you really Jake? Are you really Esau? You've got the voice of Jacob. You've got the skin of Esau. Doesn't trust him. Doesn't trust him for good reason. Rebekah doesn't trust Isaac. She overhears him. She can't trust Esau either. You see, no one can trust each other. There's a multiplication of distrust. And the foundational problem is spiritual, you see, because no one is trusting the will and the good pleasure of God and putting God at the center of their plans and at the center of their actions. A home that is healthy and not dysfunctional is a home where every member puts God at the center and His will at the center of their desires and their actions. In a godly home, every member can look at one another and give advice to each other by asking the question, what does God want you to do? That's the operative principle of a healthy home. Not what can I get, but what does God want me to do? Well, let me close this sermon then by ending with three comforts. Three comforts. The first is God's promises. Remember, don't forget, even though they spoiled a great deal, God's promises still ultimately went through. God can make crooked sticks straight. God can still take the mess of your home, and He can still bring you great blessing. God is a faithful, promising, covenant-keeping God. He's not done with your family yet. You're still alive. He can still do wonders. He's not finished with your children yet. They're still under your roof. Or if they're not, they're still alive in society. Trust the Lord. Remember the day you brought them for baptism. He said on that day, I'm willing to be their God. I put my triune name beside their name. Plead that. Ask Him to have respect unto His covenant for your children. Second comfort, God's purposes. God's promises and His purposes coalesce, just like His decree of election and His providence coalesce. You see, when God hasn't finished with our families, it means He won't make any mistakes. He'll fulfill His own purposes. And He'll even fulfill them through and despite our mistakes. One thing I always marvel about children, when you go to a child and say, I've been wrong, please forgive me. Children are very gracious and say, yes, of course I'll forgive you, Dad. They're willing to allow that their parents are going to make mistakes. You know, God is the same way. When you come to him and say, please forgive me for not being the parent I should. Fulfill your loving purposes, Lord, in my children, despite who I am. God will hear such cries. The counsel of the Lord shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. Thank God that he's not left his great purposes in our frail hands. Jesus Christ came from this family. God fulfilled his purposes despite Isaac, despite Rebekah, despite Esau, despite Jacob. And he'll do it again. His kingdom shall come. Our duty is to go to him in repentance where we fail, and then to remain faithful in our callings to him, and to find comfort in trusting that not one of his purposes shall fail.
Thank you for listening to Doctrine for Life with Dr. Joel Beeke. If you were encouraged by this episode and would like to hear more, please consider subscribing and sharing with a friend. To enjoy more resources from the pen and pulpit of Dr. Beeke, please visit joelbeeke.org.